Hi, I'm Jacob Hornberger, Libertarian candidate for president. I'm on the way home, and I'm on the road again. And so I figured, well, let me give a little bit of commentary here, and on the road commentary. I appeared on a podcast last night, and it's called Punk Rock Libertarians. Really good show. The moderators were very knowledgeable, very pleasant, very insightful. It was a fun event, but also a very analytical event too. It went on 1 hour with the regular guests, and then a second hour with people who were paying $3 a month through Patreon. So I wanted to talk to you about what we discussed in there, because it's extremely important. And a new concept occurred to me with respect to the National Convention, or what I call the Two Ring Circus, the Trump-Kennedy circus, that the Libertarian Party hierarchy has foisted upon us. And I wanted to talk to you about that because I'd never thought about this concept until after the show was over. And that's the concept of chaos. That regardless of where one stands, pro-Trump speaking at the convention or anti-Trump speaking at the convention, the fact is that what the party hierarchy has done is introduce chaos into this convention. That's a totally different deal than whether Trump should be speaking there or not and Kennedy should be speaking there. You've got argument, strife, conflict, division. You have chaos. Now, why is this so important? Well, y'all have heard me say that we're at war here. This is not just some little fun game to win freedom. And if freedom were easy to achieve, everybody in history would have been living in a free society. But very few people have actually achieved freedom. And it's a very tiny minority. But the tiny minority that did achieve freedom had to fight hard for it. It is never given to you on a silver platter. If it were, like I say, everybody would have it. But you have to win freedom, and winning freedom means you got to fight hard for it. You got to fight against the oppressors, the people that are depriving you of freedom, the ones that are enforcing the infringements, that are managing the infringements. And in our case, that means Democrats and Republicans. And that means Donald Trump and Joe Biden and Bobby Kennedy Jr. He has the same philosophy as the Democrats and Republicans. It's one party, the Welfare Warfare Party, divided into two wings. We need to go to war against this party, the Welfare Warfare State Party, and their representatives, Trump and Biden and Kennedy and whoever else, Green Party and whatever, because they're all in that mindset of the pro-welfare warfare state and all the other infringements that we're experiencing, drug war, immigration controls, and so forth. And so it's a war that involves not weapons like guns, but weapons in the form of our principles. Those are our weapons. That's what I've said from the very beginning of this campaign, that our principles are our greatest asset. And I'm talking about the principles that I'm enunciating, the founding principles in this party. Well, let's assume that you're in a real war, okay? And you've got two armies facing each other on the battlefield. And they're getting ready to go to battle against each other. But one side, let's assume, has artillery. Well, it would behoove that side that has artillery, right before the battle starts, to just pummel the other side with their artillery. Why? Because it throws the other side in chaos. They've got, they're all grouped up. They're ready to go. They're organized. They've got their unit commanders out in front. They're ready to go into battle, assuming that it's a frontal assault. But you throw artillery shells in there in large numbers, and all of a sudden, there's chaos. There's people moving around trying to figure out what to go. A unit commander's knocked out. He's killed. What happens to his unit? And the whole idea of creating the chaos is that it gives you the advantage. Then you can go on the attack or whatever, and people are trying to figure out what the heck's going on. Well, that's what they've done here with this convention, because this convention should be a moment of celebration over the selection of our presidential and vice presidential candidate, and all the focus should be on that. And then what we're going to do to win votes, to get out ahead, to do well in this race. And so the whole convention can get spurred up and excited, and people consolidating and figuring out, well, look, I can do this and I can do this, and in my state, can we do this, and so forth. So people can make plans to support the presidential and vice presidential candidate. They have totally weakened that concept with this chaos, because now the entire attention of the convention is on Trump and Biden. I mean, Trump and Kennedy. And that produces all kind of strife and division that impedes the progress of the presidential and vice presidential candidacy in that race. So it's not intentional sabotage, obviously. They mean well, but it's like I said in my last commentary, it's negligent sabotage. That they're trying to, whatever they're trying to do, which I'll discuss in a minute here. But in the process of trying to do that, they throw chaos in there, and that hurts the presidential campaign, which they've already marginalized. You see, that by creating this whole controversy, they have shunted aside the presidential race and the vice presidential race. These have become the sideshows, marginalized. And that does not help us once this campaign starts. It's not fatal by any means, because a strong presidential campaign can easily overcome that. But it's a factor to consider when we look at sabotage of the candidacy through chaos. Now, last night there was an insider that was part of the host, the panel. He's inside the party hierarchy. So getting his analysis was very interesting, because when I analyze, I look at from the outside looking in. He's looking at it from the inside looking in. And so his analysis was this, that Jacob, we're going nowhere with this presidential race. It's the standard 0.5%, 1%, and we have to try something different. We have to throw a Hail Mary pass. This Trump invitation is a Hail Mary pass. And so I said, well, explain that to me. What do you mean by that? He says, well, we get publicity. And I've heard this one for 30 years now. Publicity, Jacob, publicity. We get publicity with Trump coming and speaking at our convention, and people hear about the Libertarian Party and they come and check us out, and then they're ready to vote for us. So why does he say, first of all, that we're in the fourth quarter? That was his phrase. We're in the fourth quarter, we need a Hail Mary pass, football analogy. Because he's saying we're going nowhere, 0 to 1%, okay, in the presidential race. Well, I've been saying this from the very beginning. I mean, you can go back to the very first debate, and I said we are at 1%. At that time, we were at 1%. I said if voter sentiment has not changed over the last 3 years, then we already know the results in November. I said it's the very first debate, and I repeated it debate after debate after debate. I said, we are going to get 0 to 1%. And when the polls over the debate season started going down, I said, it's getting worse. Because one debate just a month or so ago had us at 0. And so that's what he's talking about. But it's finally settling in to the party hierarchy. They're finally realizing that we're looking at 0 to 1%. Because nothing's changed. I've been saying this from the first debate on. And so we already know the results, unless we change directions. I've said that at every debate. We need to change directions if we want to achieve a big breakout in votes. And as y'all know, I believe that a big breakout, 10 to 15%, is entirely possible. Okay? And so, but we have to do something different, completely different, dramatically different. I said this at every convention. People at the conventions where I was participating will remember this. We need to change directions completely and dramatically, which means restoring the brand of principled libertarianism. Okay? And then figuring out different audiences to target for votes instead of the standard Republican. Well, he's now acknowledging that they're in the party hierarchy, this is true, that we're not getting anywhere in November. We already know the results. And that's why they have marginalized the presidential race. It makes logical sense from their perspective. And that's why you had the Adrian Malagón treating the presidential race like a big joke at the California Libertarian Party convention, where he says, I'm only going to let 2 contenders in the convention debate plus Robert F. Kennedy. It's just a joke, because they have come to realize that I'm right. And then this Hail Mary pass that, bringing in Trump, that's what they consider doing something different. So I said, but look, to the moderator, I said, all the people that love Trump are going to vote for Trump anyway. Okay, so coming to the convention, how does it get us votes? In fact, it costs us votes as far as I'm concerned, because there are people out there who hate Trump. Millions of people hate Trump. And they also hate Biden. There's a lot of people who hate Biden. They hate both of them. But we're going to lose those voters if they feel that we're a pro-Trump party. And so Angela McArdle says, well, of the 2 candidates, so in her mind, it's already a 2-person race. And of the 2 candidates, Trump's the better candidate. Well, if that's not an endorsement, I don't know what is. I mean, she is saying that in a 2-person race with the LP candidate supposedly marginalized, 0 to 1%, Trump is the better candidate for president. And so she's signaling, we favor Trump over Biden. So every single person that hates Trump and hates Biden is not going to go with the Libertarian Party under that sentiment, under that mindset, because we're a pro-Trump party. So then I said, and he says, well, yeah, but this will generate publicity and get people interested. And the notion, and I've addressed this at conventions too, the notion is that there's this big, large group of people out there, voters, that don't know about the Libertarian Party. And that if they just were to hear about the Libertarian Party, they'd come in and say, oh, wow, man, gosh, man, I'm going to go vote Libertarian. Wow. But this is ridiculous, because every voter knows about the Libertarian Party. How can he not? We've been in existence 52 years. I mean, if there really are people that don't know, they're not very likely to vote for the Libertarian anyway, because they don't keep up with politics or political parties or anything like that. And not only that, remember that we had a congressman running as our presidential candidate, a Republican. Okay? Now, when Bob Barr came in, he came in with his standard Republican message. Okay? He didn't adopt our principles. He came in with Republican principles. He may have adopted 1 or 2, but by and large, it's the standard, what has become the standard Libertarian message today, what I call Republican light, which is reform Social Security, reform Medicare and Medicaid, reform the drug war, reform immigration controls, reform monetary policy, reform the military, reform, but keep the infringements intact so we can get Republican voters. That's always been the quest. We got to meet these voters halfway. So then we can jump to 2012, and Gary Johnson comes in. He's a Republican governor, a 2-time governor. He was governor of New Mexico twice. I mean, this was big publicity. People tend to forget it, but massive publicity. A Republican governor. He comes in with his Republican principles, and by the end of his second run, that message of Republican light has now become the new Libertarian message. And the message that I adhere to, open borders, repeal Medicare, Medicaid, other socialist programs immediately, separate school and state, reject vouchers, and legalize all drugs, that's gotten just overwhelmed like a tsunami with this new message of Republican light that has now been redefined as Libertarian. But then in 2016, you get another governor coming in to be the vice president. This is big fame. This is a big publicity. We often forget about this. And for some reason, there's an anomaly there. They get 3%. Nobody can explain it. But the variable is Weld. And so somehow or another, I think Weld brought in these extra 2%. I don't know how, but he's the variable here. Because as soon as the 2020 race comes, our presidential candidate, Joe Jorgensen, gets back to 1.1. And there was no doubt that the party hierarchy was just assuming that our base in 2020 was 3%. Because they were saying, if we run the kind of campaign Jacob wants to run, of restoring the founding principles of this party, he's going to take us back to 1%. That's what they were saying. And so they run the standard reform-oriented campaign, pretty lackluster campaign, because it's reform-oriented, and it takes us back to 1%, 1.1% to be exact. Now, here's another thing about this publicity factor. You see, because it's like going to the doctors. If you go to the doctors and the doctor gives you a wrong diagnosis, he's going to give you the wrong prescription. So if he says, hey, your stomach ache is caused by stomach indigestion, and he gives you Rolaids, that's going to be different from if there's a cancerous tumor there that he could have excised in time. All right, so what we're doing here is analyzing what's the problem here, because at every convention that I went to, when I would point out that we've got this 99% rejection rate, I would say, and I said it last night during the show, I think this guy, the insider, was stunned when I said, I'm with the 99%. I reject this message too. And I do. I think the 99% who reject this message are absolutely right to reject it. Okay? So if you go to like to Chase Oliver's race for U.S. Senate a year and a half ago, very instructive. I mean, if we don't analyze our races, how are we going to improve? And so Chase runs for U.S. Senate in Georgia, statewide race, a first-class campaign. Okay, I mean, it seemed to me it was flawless. Meet and greets all across the state, and because he was the deciding factor as to whether the two big boys, Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker, were going to be in the runoff, he got this massive publicity for him and the Libertarian Party. Much more publicity than this Trump thing has brought. I don't think anybody will ever match the publicity that Chase got in that race. I mean, wire services, national television, Rolling Stone, Washington Post, New York Times, and it was daily. It didn't just last a short period of time, because this was going to decide control over the Senate. Massive publicity. I would say at least $40-50 million, maybe more. That's as good as money. I mean, because what are you going to do with money? You know, big money. Jacob, and it came up last night. We need big money. Well, big money for what? To buy advertising. Well, Chase got advertising without the big money. It's incredible. And then he got into a statewide debate with a U.S. senator, because you often hear that too. Jacob, if they let us into the debate, everything would be different. And I keep saying, no, it wouldn't. Because people are not going to, there's no constituency for this Republican light reform-oriented message as a libertarian. There is as a Republican, but not as a libertarian. So Chase gets his message out to every single voter in Georgia. I mean, if anybody got his message out, it's Chase Oliver. And what was that message? Standard reform-oriented. Healthcare reform, keep Medicare and Medicaid, get health savings accounts or direct medical care, 25-year plan, one generation for Social Security, opt-out plans, but continue to force young people to pay the Social Security checks for the next generation. And then you've got, school vouchers, immigration controls, immigration reform, monetary reform, lower inflation. In the debate with Warnock, he says, I favor small government, lower taxes, lower inflation, and drug war reform. So, like I've said before, there are a few people better able to make this case for the reform message than Chase Oliver. At the end of this, after all this massive publicity, 2% of the vote. Why? Because there's not a big group of people out there that will vote for this message as a libertarian. If Chase had run against Herschel Walker in the Republican primary, I think he would have stood a chance, a great chance, of maybe even beating Walker, but he would have done a lot better because this is a popular message in the Republican Party. And faced with a Republican that carries this message versus a libertarian who carries this message, people are always going to vote for the Republican. It's logical. Last night it was raised again about the wasted vote syndrome and how we can get around this wasted vote syndrome. I said, you can't. It's a real reality here. People are wasting their vote when they vote for the Libertarian. Because if the Libertarian has the same positions, essentially, with variations, there's always going to be variations, but the same overall position as a Republican, they're going to vote for Republican. Otherwise, they're wasting their vote. They're wasting their vote by voting for a libertarian. A perfect example of this is immigration controls. All my opponents favor immigration controls, all right, because they're targeting Republicans. There's a popular message in the Republican Party. But every single, and they think, oh, well, this will be a big vote getter because, boy, it's popular in the Republican Party, where school vouchers are also very popular. So that's their target audience, the Ron Paul voters, okay? Well, the problem is that no right-wing proponent is ever going to waste his vote on a libertarian that is a right-wing proponent of vouchers or immigration controls. He's always, or she's always, going to vote for Trump. He's the big enchilada when it comes to immigration controls. So it would be a wasted vote. And so my point is, there is no big mass of voters out there to vote for this message. That's why we get this 0 to 1%. Now, same with Mike Tremont. Mike Tremont ran for Congress, U.S. House, at the same time Chase ran for Senate. 20th Congressional District. He got into the debates there. And he got publicity for his message. And same message he's running on today. He wants to be the nominee under his Gold New Deal. He took that same message, Gold New Deal, to the electorate there in the 20th Congressional District. He didn't get the same publicity Chase did, but he got his message out with these debates, and like I say, ran a really good campaign. And again, Mike Tremont, when it comes to explaining and justifying, defending this reform-oriented message, he's as good as Chase as far as I'm concerned. These guys are good at what they do, but at the end, he got less than 1%. And so now both of them are saying, hey, well, make me the nominee because I'm going to take the same message to the electorate. Why wouldn't the result be the same? Well, it is. We already know it is. It's at 0 to 1%. And that's what this insider was saying last night. His solution and the party solution is bring Donald Trump, and will shake things up. And I'm saying, no, because you're not addressing the real problem. You're not diagnosing the problem. And that is, it's the message that's the problem. Who's figured this out, and I've mentioned it before, is Justin Amash. Amash comes into the Libertarian Party with this Republican-light message. Reform, 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 reform. That has been redefined as libertarian. He'll say, I'm a libertarian, and my positions are libertarian, and people will say his positions are libertarian, because that's the new libertarianism. But if you were to ask Justin about my positions, open borders, separate school and state, reject vouchers, repeal Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security immediately, without any hesitation whatsoever, dismantle the entire national security state, restore a limited government republic with just a basic military force. Justin would be totally opposed to these concepts, or at least in large part opposed. He might favor one or the other. Open borders. There's no way he would favor open borders. So he figured this out, that if he runs for U.S. Senate, which he's doing, as a libertarian, and he could have had the nomination of our party on a silver platter without fighting for it, he would have gotten just 2% like Chase, or less than 1% like Mike, because there's no big mass of voters that will vote for Republican light. And that's the problem here. So he goes into the Republican Party, and he's having a tough time. And I said this a couple months ago, he was going to have a hard time because he voted to impeach Trump, and he moved to the Libertarian Party. They're going to call him a traitor. So he's at 7% against the guy that's leading the race. There's 4 people in the race. The guy leading is at 24%. But the election's not till August, and Amash could win this race, but he could never win it as a libertarian. You see, to win it, he's going to have to get the plurality of the votes. But as a libertarian, he knows that if he had just taken the Libertarian Party nomination, he wouldn't have had to fight for it. He would have had an L next to his name in November, 0 to 2%, because there's no constituency out there. So he's got big publicity. He's a congressman who switched over. Y'all recall the big, massive national publicity that Justin got when he moved over to the Libertarian Party. And national publicity. So that's what I'm saying. Everybody knows about the Libertarian Party. The problem is that they're under this assumption, and it's a very logical assumption, that the Libertarian Party is a right-wing party. I mean, that's the image we built up over 20 years. The press refers to the Libertarian Party as a right-wing party. And so then bringing in Trump reinforces that. So what am I saying? I'm saying that publicity is not the problem here. It's the message. And that what we need to do, we've got a foundation that's built on sand right now. Because Republican light and reform of socialism for a party that calls itself the party of principle is a foundation of sand. Where we're all excited about Trump or some bash. Oh, and I was told last night by this insider that the plan is to boo Trump. Well, and that'll generate more publicity. What is that all about? I mean, I say let's just run against Donald Trump. Let's, hit his positions, hit his philosophy, hit his record. Just run a hard-hitting campaign. But to invite him in and just so you can boo him, I think that's going to turn off a lot of people. That's what I believe. I mean, it's sort of the variation of macho flash. You don't need to invite somebody only to get him booed. Just don't invite him in the first place and go to war against him. He is as much a destroyer of our freedom as Joe Biden is and Bobby Kennedy is. Go to war against them with respect to their positions. Use our principles, open borders, repeal socialism immediately. Take the offensive and don't let up. Never, never compromise, because as soon as you compromise, you have weakened your position. You have to fall back, you have to regroup, and then you have to possibly move into the field of, oh, well, Jacob, we don't, this is too big. We have to accept our serfdom. We have to be acquiescent to it, deferential to our masters, servile, subservient, obsequious. No, none of that. Let's fight. That's what I'm saying. Let's fight. And we fight with our weapons, not weapons of violence, weapons of principles. Our principles, I've said this for over 30 years, when I served on the platform committee, 3 terms, I said, our principles are our greatest asset. Not with Republicans. Don't target Republicans. Take our principles, run a campaign where the foundation of this party is on rock. You build it on rock, which is what our foundations would do, our principles would do. And then you target totally different groups of people. Okay, with open borders, you go to migrant families. With the drug war and the racial bigotry of the drug war and other Jim Crow like occupational licensure, you target blacks for votes. Okay, forget Republicans, forget Democrats. Go after people who don't vote. But the only way you're going to go after them is by making the case for dismantling the welfare warfare state. Then you're going to get their attention because they know that it doesn't matter which one they vote for, Trump or Biden. And then the last group is the poor people, the ones that are really getting ravaged by inflation. Everybody's getting ravaged by inflation, but they're the ones that can't adjust because they're paycheck to paycheck. They're barely making ends meet. And we go in there, we make the case for sound money, not just end the Fed. Republicans are now calling for ending the Fed. But no, separate money in the state and make that case that Hayek made. Then that's what I say. That's how we can achieve a major breakout, because we're no longer targeting Republicans for votes. We're holding Republicans to account for what they've done to our freedom, to our prosperity, $34 trillion in debt. And Trump was right in there giving those free stimulus checks, right up there, keeping troops in Afghanistan, refusing to pardon Assange, Snowden, and Ulbricht, keeping the CIA's assassination-related records to its assassination of John Kennedy secret from the American people in violation of law. I mean, I could go on and on, but that's the kind of campaign I want to run. A campaign that doesn't let up. And then, and especially in this area of immigration, we have an opportunity to break through enemy lines. They're vulnerable here. We break through their lines on immigration, and all of a sudden, we're doing some serious open field running in this campaign. And they're vulnerable there. Their lines are thin because they're having to defend their record of death, suffering, rapes, kidnappings, detention centers, concertina wire, Berlin Wall. That's not an easy task, especially with somebody that is hitting them hard on it, which is what I want to do. So that's my analysis of what happened. Convention's next week. I won't be on the debate. When y'all watch this debate, as y'all know, I'm not going to be participating in it. I hope you'll say, what would Jacob say during this debate? I'm Jacob Hornberger, Libertarian candidate for president. My campaign website is jacobforliberty.com.